We are now ready to go. So welcome to the October webinar for Ideas at Dawn. What are we talking about? We have here talking about 5 grammar rules to improve your writing and establish your expertise. So some expectations before we introduce your team here today. Be active, participate. We would love to see your video. Ashley and I, can be hard talking to a bunch of names. So if you would love to join Rita, Therese, myself, Ashley, have some of us who have our videos on, we would love to see you. Again, I say it every time, there are no stupid questions. So if you have a question for Ashley or myself, put it in the chat, or you can come off mute. So let me know and we can do that as well. We are we've all done this before, so I'll trust you that you all can stay mute. We're not getting on a call of 200 parents who don't know how to mute their call with hockey group. So I trust you all that you all can do this. Ask your questions in the chat. The recording will be sent out tomorrow. Today, if I am all on top of my things, but to get your fingers warmed up and your brain moving, introduce yourself in the chat. So your name, your role, and for Ashley's sake, are you a writer? Do you like to write? Do you love grammar? Okay. So we would love to know where you're from, role, anything that you would love to have us know about you. For those that don't know, my name is Angie Wolfe. I am your host today, bringing nearly 20 years in the AEC industry with some large Fortune 500 firms, helping win tens of billions of dollars of new work throughout these last 20 years. We do not count the losses, so don't ask. Now I own my own consulting firm, bringing large civil engineering and construction firms a competitive advantage with their proposals and trainings to help them win more work without adding on more payroll. And then today, so that's a little bit about me. Here I have Miss Ashley Teatum, who is, what is she? Division proposal lead at Flatiron. Used to live here in Colorado, then she left us, or some of us. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in English and in journalism. So her and I have a little bit of a connection there, both a journalism writing background. Went to school at University of Scranton, worked as a sports reporter. She did TV or newspaper, I did TV. So her and I were meant to do this together. She co-founded a marketing content development group. That's when you were back in Colorado, right, Ashley? Yeah. And then
that's
joined
correct,
a nonprofit, wrote grants, did some fundraising. Now she's helping Flatiron conquer the East Coast world of proposals, although she works with Flatiron. I guess you're both on both coasts. Her and I have probably competed against each other a few times. So yeah, it's been fun. So that's Ashley. And Ashley, I am ready when you are, if you want to share your screen. I thought that was you, Heidi.
And if you stop sharing, I'll go ahead and share.
Okay.
I adore these messages in the chat. I love all of the other sports nerds, writing nerds, grammar nerds. I'm just super happy to see such a mix of folks on this call today. And to Angie's point, absolutely stop us with questions. Anything that you want to dig into deeper, anything that you're not sure about, or you want to see a different example, more examples, we can absolutely roll through those. But that's where we're at today. So let's get rolling here. I wanted to start with why is this important? And honestly, this talk began as a talk solely about grammar. I could talk about this all day, but what it evolved into was less specific grammar rules and more about the strategies that I turn to when I'm cleaning a copy for a proposal that are steeped in grammar. So when you're writing, grammar is the foundation for your writing, but you have other things like tone. What does it sound like when I'm reading this? Is it technical? Is it informal? I've got diction, which is the types of word choices that I'm making, or I've got style, but your building blocks for everything are grammar. And when you implement these tools that we're going to talk about today, whether you're in the process of revision, you've finished writing, and even when you're actually going through the writing process, these things will immediately clean up your writing. But I wanted to start with why this is important. For proposals, our audience is scoring our writing. They're scoring what we're putting together. They're scoring what our team has developed as part of our proposed approach to building a project, to formulating software, like whatever it is that you're doing as far as proposals go. And when it comes to revising your writing using these tools today, it basically strengthens your writing so that if your evaluator is working to read your proposal, they're not going to have a great time, actually understanding what it is you're trying to tell them. They're going to be working too hard, and they might even score you down some points because it's difficult to understand what it is you're trying to tell them. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about today kind of strengthens your writing, reduces ambiguity, really enhances the messaging that you're trying to put into your proposal. And the one caveat I'm going to have with all of this, and this is a controversial take for my grammarians on the call, I prefer readability over grammatical correctness sometimes. Yes, thumbs up all around. Something may be technically correct, but if your reader is struggling to understand it, or it just sounds like it's wrong, ask me about comprise versus composed of after this call. If your reader is struggling to understand it, it doesn't matter. You're trying to create a better reading experience for your evaluator, essentially. So Angie touched a little bit on this, but who do I think I am to talk to you about this today? Really brief on my credentials, not going to keep my photos up for very long. Graduated with a BA in English, daily newspaper. I've just read, designed, proofread thousands of pages at this point in my 10 to 12-year career. So this is where I'm kind of coming from with all of this today. Here's what we're looking at as far as our agenda. These are the 5 things we're going to roll through. We're going to start with nominalization. I'll explain what that means here in a second. We'll go through active versus passive voice, the undefined it or this. Verbs we find ourselves leaning on a whole lot, which could make for some uninteresting writing. And then omit needless all, which may be self-explanatory. Before we dive into that, I had to throw a dad joke in. So, what is the difference between a cat and a comma? One has claws at the end of its paws, and the other is a pause at the end of a clause. You're welcome. I love all the groans. I can feel it. I can feel your groaning. All right, let's dive into nominalization. First and foremost, it seems like a bigger word than it is, but all it simply means is when you convert a verb or an adjective into a noun. The word itself is a nominalization of the word nominalize. It's essentially, you can look for it if it ends in ION. Often it's around of or other prepositions. Technically, it's not wrong, but it's one of these things that could make for ambiguous writing, kind of indirect, wandering sentences. The quote here is from one of the style guides I like to turn to. A sentence seems clear when its important actions are in verbs. So one of the goals when I am writing and revising is how can I make stronger writing by looking for more, and we'll talk active voice, but active, interesting, engaging, strong verbs. And one of those ways is by looking for my nominalizations in a document and converting them into verbs. And I know technical writing, we fall into this trap a lot. But what I've got here throughout this presentation are just some real life examples and how we can kind of refinesse a sentence to make it, a little bit more straightforward, a little stronger. So what we're looking at here, documentation is our nominalization here. That's our verb that became a noun. Documentation of the context of safety incidents allows us to analyze how to prevent and rectify future safety issues. Now, it's not wrong, sounds fine, but think about it a little bit. Does it have a certain tone? Do you get a certain feeling from it? Do you have a good sense of, what's going on in the sentence? Super simple way to fix that. Let's change that word back into a verb. By documenting safety incidents, we can analyze how to prevent them in the future. Let's look at another example. Again, we've got that TION word that indicates to me that's a nominalization. That's a verb that we turn into a noun. Combination of site walks and active safety documentation gives our team the opportunity to learn from safety trends. Very simply, I can jump to the next part of that sentence. What is the thing that I am talking about? What is the thing in this sentence that enables constant coordination? And I guess I just want to pause here and just, it gives me a more direct way of writing about what I'm talking about. I'm kind of eradicating these unnecessary words. I'm jumping to the point of my sentence simply by changing this noun, this very big noun that kind of drags my sentence on, and getting it back into its verb form. Along those same lines, I've got active voice, and I'm sure you've heard active voice versus passive voice. That's something you probably heard in your English classes. But very simply, when a sentence is written in active voice, that's typically the subject, which falls usually at the beginning of your sentence, just as a shorthand, is the source of the action in the sentence. And the object, which is the typically end of your sentence, receives the action. So something is doing something to something else. I lost the money, and I'm very sad about that. I am the person, or I am the subject of the sentence, and I am doing something. I lost the money. And if we wrote that in passive voice, we would take the object, the money, the thing that I lost, was lost by me, i.e. the subject. Some real life examples. And I should add, Flatiron is a construction company, so these are all construction related examples, in case you were keeping score at home. A steel pile bulkhead will be constructed. So it begs the question, who's going to construct the bulkhead? Who's going to do that? We can change that around and say crews will construct the bulkhead. The caveat within this context, though, especially if you are writing about process or a series of steps that needs to be completed, and it is a given that it's going to be your company or your key personnel, whomever that's going to be doing it, it can sound very redundant if you are continually rewriting these passive voice sentences into active voice, because all of a sudden I will have an entire paragraph of crews will do this. Crews will also do this. In addition, crews are going to do this. So picking and choosing where you implement these tools for revision is going to be a huge part of when you do this in your writing and in your revision. Let's look at another one. Again, and you're starting to kind of recognize a pattern with some of these, right? You'll have that be verb will be coordinated. Even if you can't tell me, well, the subject is not acting upon the object, that's not necessarily, important. It's just recognizing I can't identify who's going to be doing the coordinating in this sentence. So one way we can fix that is our geotechnical lead will coordinate the bore locations. So again, just finding somebody who's actually going to be doing the action within a sentence. We have a nice little slide here of all the exceptions. So things to ask yourself, is it important for your reader to know who's responsible for an action? Like we talked about the process, if you find yourself sounding the same throughout an entire paragraph, maybe you can mix up your sentences, some active voice, some passive voice. How do I create a smoother reading experience for my evaluators or my audience? And even what version keeps your writing consistent? No matter what, making sure that you're not making your reader do work by making them think too hard or make conclusions themselves is going to be extremely helpful when we're talking through revision. And just a couple of examples for those exceptions. Work will begin once the permit is obtained. Is obtained is my passive voice, but I'm probably going to leave something like this as it is, whether it's, I'm not sure when the timeline is, the work beginning depends on when the permit's obtained. So it's kind of this uncertain thing. If I were to rewrite this to active voice and I knew, for example, DOT is going to obtain the permit, I don't necessarily feel comfortable as a proposal writer saying, Work will begin once DOT obtains the permit. I kind of don't want to assign work to my client in my proposal. I just want to tell them, I know this begins after this begins. And the second part, we developed a new solution and the redesign was approved by the client. The way I looked at this one was the focus is really on the solution piece of this sentence. And if I rewrite this sentence, the client approved the redesign, suddenly my solution and my innovation get split by the verb, and it's not one single continuous thought. So there's, it's kind of like looking at the whole context of something before you just dive in and change everything to active voice and, do things like that to your writing. Any questions so far? How are we doing on the chat and everything?
One question, Ashley. Do you have a favorite style guide?
I adore you for that. I just picked
me,
one.
but hey.
I actually, there is one titled Style, Lessons in Clarity and Grace. And I know everybody goes to the strunk and white elements of style, but the Lessons in Clarity and Grace gives you greater context and allows for a little bit more flex. Is it really nerdy that I was able to tell you immediately my favorite style guide? It's fine. But it gives you more context. It allows for more of these exceptions. So it's not solely you must do this and there's no exceptions to that. So that's one I would highly recommend and I think it's written well for grammar nerds and new writers alike. So it's a good way to dig into some of these concepts for sure.
Yeah. What was the name again, Ashley? Style, Lessons in... Wait, I did it wrong. What was the name?
I got you. Style, Lessons in Clarity and Grace. I think I could drop it in the chat here.
I got it. I just
got me?
I had Lessons in Style and Grace. I'm like, well, that's not right.
You're like, that doesn't sound right.
No.
Awesome. Everything making sense so far too. So far, so good.
So far, so good.
All right. We'll head into undefined pronouns. And this is your undefined it or this. And pronouns, you might recall, take the place of nouns. So Ashley, she, her, Angie, she, her, the book, it. Sometimes you might take that too far. You end up with either a sentence that you don't really understand where we're going. You don't know who's performing what action. You end up with a platitude. You end up with something that is a little contrived and just doesn't have a whole lot of substance behind it. You'll recognize it is imperative that, or it is integral to the project that, it is important what is? So here, if I answer that question, what is imperative? Keeping a complete and accurate project record on every project is imperative to something, perhaps the project. So it just gets a little convoluted. One way to rewrite that, tell me at the beginning of the sentence, what is imperative? A complete and accurate project record. But from one of our previous slides, you may notice we have a passive voice sentence. So I can go one step further and tell you who must capture a complete and accurate project record. The reason I might keep something like it is imperative that is if I'm trying to mix up my sentence structure for an interesting reading experience, or trying to use with my tone and my word choices that I understand as a company how key this thing is to your project startup or to the success of the work being completed. So again, a very quick way to, and by the way, if you notice, I lose lines every time I move along. So all of a sudden, I've shrunk up the amount of space that this takes up. Fantastic if you're trying to find those last few pages to get under page count. Now, this is an example of an undefined this. And as smart reading comprehension readers, right? We understand what this relates to. But again, we want to be doing a lot of the legwork for our evaluators, for our audience, so that they're not working so hard to understand what it is we're trying to convey to them. We hold a kickoff meeting within a week of notice to proceed. This creates clear lines of communication at the start of the project. what is this referring to? Is it just the kickoff meeting? Is it the timeline within which we're holding the kickoff meeting? So let's tell the client it's our approach to holding a kickoff meeting within a week of getting notice to proceed. Let's be as specific as possible so that they don't have to do the work of making connections that we should be making for them. Our fourth topic, verbs we lean on. You're welcome. These are great. These are really helpful in a pinch when I'm just not sure what else I could possibly say. It is a little bit difficult to rewrite sentences that have allow, provide, enable, ensure. It's a thing that allows me to do something else. And sometimes you're just not going to have another option, but we can try to find some interesting words that we can replace, to make it a more powerful, punchy action in the sentence. And the thing I will say about ensure as well, I'm sure other folks have run into this, ensure is a legal term in many cases. And knowing that our proposals become part of the contract very often, we need to make sure that we are willing to tag ourselves onto those commitments that we're making. So we just look for ways that we can get rid of the word ensure, and it will make for a stronger sentence. One way we do that, just jump to the next verb. So in this sentence, we say, we're going to review schedules with staff to ensure operations are advancing per plan. Let's just jump to advancing the operations per plan. So just get rid of one verb, find my next verb, and see if I can rewrite it to jump to that next one. Here's another example. This phasing allows us to complete the ramps 5 months early. Completely okay sentence. Totally says what it needs to say. I can flip it and say, make it into a commitment. We will complete the ramps 5 months early by implementing this phasing. If I think, though, that the phasing is the key part of my sentence, like this thing we have come up with, this approach is super important, let me front load it into the sentence. Through this phasing scheme, we'll complete the ramps 5 months early. Again, allows us, totally fine, but see how we created a more active, interesting sentence by getting to an active verb, flipping it around to show the client, this is the important thing I want you to take away from here. The graphic below provides additional context for our plan. I feel like Angie will like this one. I give myself a figure number, which graphic below, where am I? Tell my person exactly where I'm going. In figure 1, we illustrate the details of our plan, or we expand upon, anything to kind of encourage them to get to that figure and see what it is I'm talking about. I'm about to dive into the last one. We still going good?
We're good.
All right. Omit needless all. Strunk and White says omit needless words. And there's a professor at NYU, Joe Moses, who says omit needless all. So this is a nice elision of those two concepts. We're essentially looking for words, phrases, redundancies, things that just bog down our writing, that if we get rid of them, we can get to the essence of what we're saying in a sentence. So first and foremost, if you're using a comma, you don't need thereby, thusly, therefore. Just by using a comma in a sentence and having that word after it, you're making yourself redundant. By putting the comma there, you are saying therefore. We share schedules with the whole team, comma, providing transparency across the board. Removing redundancies. Aren't fundamentals basic? Isn't your experience in the past? There are definitely ways that you can look for those double words or things that you've already said, get it down to one word. If you're going to screen grab one slide, this is my to-do list of find and replace as soon as I finish writing something. I get rid of all of my in order tos because all you have to say is to. If you are able to do something, you can do something. The reason for something is its why. In the event that is your if. So those are just some quick find and replaces that I have when I'm going back through and looking for ways to revise sentences. So I'm going to pause here. Any other questions or things that kind of cropped up or examples that you've seen, et cetera?
None in the chat.
Awesome.
You want to come off mute and ask Ashley a question before she gets.
Ashley,
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey.
could you repeat what you said about the word insure being a legal term? I was like listening and then I was like, wait, what? What is she saying about?
For sure. So in some cases, insure, and this is kind of cropped up in our industry for construction, insure is a legally binding term in many cases. And so if you're saying in your, volume 2 technical proposal insures something, that is something that your client could potentially hold you to contractually. Sometimes it isn't, but we've definitely run into cases like that. So it's often just easier to pull that word out and find a more interesting verb to replace it with.
I hate it. It's in so our team is pretty fresh still. We're about 2 years old. And so we're still pulling from past proposals and there's usually, 25 insures. And then I'm just like, oh, I hate this word now.
And it's wild because you'll do a control F and look for these things and all of a sudden they're just all over the place. Allows, provides, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's totally okay. I had another slide where I highlighted every instance of the phrase will be, and the whole page is just populated with it. Sometimes you're just not going to be able to avoid it, but in the cases where you can figure out ways to write around it, I think that would be beneficial for the writing for sure.
Nice. Do you have just a follow-up chat? Do you have a cheat sheet for your control F stuff that you look for?
Sure. So this where we just were, this is a good start for it. What I would also highly recommend is, putting your style sheet together right at the beginning of your effort. And that encompasses not just these words, but also digging through your RFP and finding, do they capitalize project? Should I capitalize project? All of your, key personnel titles, include all of your project names so that when you get to the end, I usually do a find for some word that appears in those things, and make sure that I'm, stylistically correct across the board.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall is another one. Every time you run into shall, make it a will.
Yeah.
Shall is how you write a contract. Will is how we talk about what we're going to do.
How do you like the word will, Ashley? What do you think about the word will?
I have mixed feelings on that. I really think it's context-based. I think will is a great way to show commitment to something you're going to do on the project. Whereas I think in instances where you're trying to pull will out of something, it should be a description of your company's typical process for doing something. Something that you do every single time. So for example, safety, right? Safety is a section in which for construction, I might start taking out the word will, because we are going to do it on this project, but we also do it on every project, and it's integrated into our company's approach to safety. So I see will as a commitment word. And the caveat to that being, of course, making sure you're consistent across the board. So if you start using will, if you stop using will, if I start writing in past tense, or if I start writing in, have, has, and had, and all that stuff, just making sure it's similar within an entire section or paragraph.
Okay, good. Another question. Do you have any ways you found to work to encourage your staff who are not used to writing to write literally anything? And Amy, clarify with me if that makes sense. But people who aren't used to writing or are uncomfortable, how do you get them? What ways that you've gone around that to help them?
Sure. First and foremost, if you're in proposal management, I have found that folks are a mix on the spectrum as far as your own comfort with writing, right? Some folks are solely proposal managers or solely doing desktop publishing. That's totally fine. Similarly, for our subject matter experts, some of them are comfortable with writing. Some of them absolutely hate it. They're like, that's why I got into this business in the first place, so I never have to write again. Couple of ways we can address this. I ask for bullet points sometimes. Just tell me bullet points. I'm not actually expecting you to write the whole section. If you're comfortable with it, fantastic. We can work on that together. But bullet points kind of gets us started with the project specifics that go into something. Another way, I encourage folks to sit down and interview your subject matter experts. The expertise that the proposal management professional brings is by being non-technically minded many times, because we're the ones who are able to see the gaps in how we are addressing the requirements. So somebody might say to me, this is a common refrain, well, this is how we always do it. There's nothing special about it. And I'm like, cool, tell me, step one, what is the first thing that you do when you're approaching this particular part of the process? Okay, then what happens? Kind of look at it and be curious about what happens in the next step of the process. And all of a sudden you've sat down with them and you've got an entire paragraph written. The expertise that they bring, it's all just up here. They know how to build it. They do it all the time. And our job is to kind of extract that information from them.
Okay, some more. So another one, related to technical staff, sort of, but what if they start to add some of these words back in that you've edited and tightened, and you and I've had this discussion. Yeah, how do you navigate that?
I love
Your
this
example.
Oh my gosh, it's this philosophy of the color team review, and how do I start recovering the document? How do I make sure that the things, one way is you have your master document, right? We've got the place where everybody is working. A lot of times for our company, by the time we're at Red Team, we've moved into InDesign. So it's very easy for me to completely separate what the team is working on in Word or sending me separately from how I'm designing out or building out my document. So that's definitely one way. Is the story you're referring to the whole pitch of this thing? Okay.
Yeah.
The very short story is we were in a Red Team and had a discussion with someone who was a technical staff member about when or not to use a comma and dropping the dependent clause versus independent clause. And that was the end of that. The other piece of this talk that I haven't necessarily touched on and just kind of discussed a little bit just now is this is how we establish ourselves as the authority within our discipline, being proposal management. This is the stuff that we're supposed to be in the weeds knowing about. We're supposed to be the expert in what the RFQ or RFP requirements are. And we're supposed to be the expert in how to go about addressing each of those requirements through our writing, through our graphics, through the presentation of it, through the order it appears. And I think it's leaning into and building some confidence in yourself to be able to have those discussions with your technical leads, or say, you know what, we're going to keep that out. And here's why, because we can find a stronger word than ensure, or this actually makes it into a passive voice sentence. And I feel like this would be a stronger way to say it if we turn the sentence around. So I'm not accepting this change. It's definitely track changes is our friend. So we could see what edits get made by whom. But it's definitely going to be, I feel like, our eternal back and forth is recovering for our color team reviews and establishing ourselves as the expert within that field.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Some more questions. Words I'll throw at you. Is committed, there's a couple questions. Is committed the same as ensure? And then talk about utilize, talk about that.
Utilize just hurt me. It's fine. I may have to Google that so that we can pull it up and look at it. I'll start there. Sorry, utilize is now just stuck in my head.
Okay.
Utilize is to take, and I'll have to double check me against a dictionary, somebody, but essentially utilize is to take something and use it for not its intended purpose, or to make it do something it's not supposed to do, to potentially, like, I swear, here we go, to innovate on how you are using something. When in doubt, just go ahead and you say use, because for the most part, you're going to use anywho. But that is my big feeling on use and utilize. Double check your dictionary definition and use the correct word based on what it is telling you it means. That and commas are in the same camp for me, in that if it makes sense that if it reads better to include a that, don't feel badly about putting another that in there. It is technically correct with and without. We just ran into this, and I'm trying to remember the sentence. Oh, it is imperative the project team works on this thing. It is imperative that. You can use it in either sense. I think it's just one of those instances where, how does it sound for the reader? If you're reading something out loud, always helpful to do that, because that's where you'll catch a lot of your funky, oh man, I could rewrite this, or this is a mouthful, this is going to be hard for someone to digest. Definitely feel empowered to add that if it makes it sound more clear. And then the first one, remind me, I passed right over the first one.
Committed. Is it the same as ensure, or have you been able to use those interchangeable?
For sure. I think commit is a great verb. I worked on a proposal where it was basically about 100 times on every page, because we really wanted to show the client we were going to do these things, and we thought that was a strong way to show that. I think ensure is the more frightening legal way to say it, versus commit is a softer, still strong way of saying it, but it's less binding than something like ensure.
Okay. Additional books, one you recommend for people to improve your writing, and then also Rita asked about one about Everybody Writes by Anne Hanley, if you use that book as well.
I have not. I like that though. I want to know that one.
Okay.
And I'm the geek that just has like the Chicago manual, the MLA guide, like all of those things just kind of sitting. Chicago is a lot of fun. I don't agree with a lot of the ways that they format, but they have a lot of great ways to explain how they go about making decisions. I want to know that book though. I kind of really enjoy that. And then your classic one really is Strunk and White, which is the elements of style.
Okay. Let me see. What do you recommend when being asked to provide additional narratives to support relevant scope, magnitude, complexity? Listing the entire scope for the projects, or is listing the scope for the project appropriate so they can see everything, or how do you kind of approach that?
I want to see that question. Hold on.
It's by Nancy.
I got you.
Okay.
One has to provide additional narratives. Sure. So one consideration you may want to make is, am I telling the client something that they've already told me? So am I regurgitating back the scope of work that they've told me? Is there anything interesting, different, innovative, or above and beyond that we are doing that they haven't already asked us to do? So I feel like that's part of it, i.e. the supporting the relevant project scope, magnitude, and complexity, listing the entire scope of work. If they've already told you what your scope is, that might be an asked and answered. You're expending some paragraph space on something that they already require you to do. So that's often a question we'll ask ourselves, right? Listing the entire sample appropriate. However, so within the context of, it seems like we're talking about project sheets here, I would lean on, why am I providing this project? What is the very specific relevancy for giving the client this project? You might consider bullet points. You might consider bolding, front loading. I'm including this project because it's got, tell me what the similar scope or complexity is, highlight or bold in some fashion the magnitude of the project. Go to everybody's favorite, using icons, using check marks, things that encourage the evaluator to see that this is a thing I included for a very specific reason, and here's why. If it's movable bridge experience that I am trying to provide, and it's for a movable bridge project, I'm going to put those keywords in there. Go back into your RFP, see what those keywords are for what they're looking for or that appear in the scope, and just absolutely steal them, use them phrase by phrase, pull it right back into yours because they like to see their language given back to them for sure. Awesome questions. This is great.
Those were it, I believe. If there's any other questions I forgot. A book Cassie referenced, which I don't know if you've heard of, Technical Writing, a Practical Guide for Engineers, Scientists, and Non-Technical Professionals.
We're gonna need just like a reading list after this. I think that's what I learned today.
Yes.
Before we get too far, this poor slide, I'm so sorry, has been up. You don't have to do editing alone by yourself, by the way. There are some really fantastic programs that you can install either as add-ons to your Word. I use Grammarly across any platform that has anything that I have to write, and that includes my Chrome browser, my Outlook, my Microsoft Word. And if we have time, I actually don't know where we're at as far as that.
You got 13 minutes, plenty of
I got
time.
13 minutes. All right, let's do that thing. You ready? We're gonna jump into a thing. Here's my nerd moment. Here we go. So I do actually have Grammarly on this one. I figured it would be interesting for us to take a look at a few paragraphs, or at least just one, and just kind of put into play what we talked about today. But I'm going to start with my big cheat, which is just opening my Grammarly software. And what a lot of these programs we use to perfect it. Angie, I know you really dig Hemingway and WordRake.
Yep.
I've also found literally copying and pasting into a Google Doc will find some more revisions that I didn't, that Word didn't catch or something else didn't catch, right? But what Grammarly and all of these will do is kind of highlight for you things that they have noticed that we can clean up, and it'll just underline it in your document. You can use your sidebar for this. It really, really wants me to add Oxford commas all over the place. I defer to whatever your in-house style is. I tend to lean on AP style, which says no serial commas. And that's just a bad habit from being in newspapers, or a good habit. But it'll notice things like, I'm looking at this sentence, and we'll see some of the things we talked about here today, right? Preventing workplace injuries is achieved when we these specifically design. So it's recognizing, hey, I think you're missing a verb here. So let's go ahead and add that in. Or it's recognizing this is a modifier that should be hyphenated because both words are referring to manner. So let's go ahead and put that hyphen in there. But just for fun, let's go ahead. We'll track changes so we can see some of the things that we had going on today, right? So I'll give us a second. I've got the original paragraph up top here so you can kind of see what's going on. But some things I immediately pick out when I look at this paragraph. I see my nominalizations. I see commitment of. I see prevention of. I see some very long sentences, by the way. This one is full on 3 lines and about 30 plus words. So if we start looking at this, we can say, we can make this into something active. We commit our entire team, which I might get rid of entire because who else is your team comprising? We commit our team to a safe and healthy work. Nope, I was going to say provide, and everyone was going to laugh. That's what was going to happen.
Complete.
Yeah,
Execute.
to complete this work in a safe and healthy manner.
Yeah.
The practices and standards contained in our, there's our passive voice, will be implemented. So who is going to be doing the implementing? We will implement the practices and standards contained in our manual together with those of our client. So it seems like we have a non-parallel structure here. We're saying one thing and then we're missing the other piece of it. So how about and will combine these with our clients' program standards. Prevention of workplace, so there's our, so let's see, the whole sentence. Here's the other thing. Adverbs don't get hyphenated. If it ends in ly, it's an adverb. So it's describing typically another adjective or a verb. How about we have specifically design safety practices that, there's a that, prevent workplace incidents, injuries, and environmental incidents. Our objective is to complete our projects in a safe and injury. It's a compound modifier. It's an injury-free and an incident-free manner. Our objective, I don't think that's too terrible. It's a little wordy, but our objective is to complete in a, how about, complete our projects safely and injury and incident free. We plan to achieve this objective. There's our undefined this, so we have it defined. And well-trained employees at our offices. It's just so long to achieve this objective through. How about through responsible management, supervisory personnel, and well-trained employees at our offices and project sites. So let's see, we had 94 words there. Let's turn off our markup. You saved yourself about 10 words, you know, we got it cleaned up a little and a little bit more streamlined. So those are different ways that we can look at a sentence or look at a paragraph and start to find ways to replace words, get the, you know, the subject of the sentence doing the action in the sentence. I'm still not sold on that last sentence though, but otherwise I think it's pretty good.
Ashley, what about repeated words like we in some of our subjects? Do you have a guide on if you repeat words, how many per paragraph per sentence? Amy was talking about how no more than 2 times in a paragraph. With
I
other
like
things
that.
Yeah, the other things I'll do is switch it up. It's the team, we, our.
Yeah, I see that.
It kind of
So
depends on your style and the team style.
that is definitely, and I think it's looking at, you know, each sentence or within a paragraph. If you find yourself saying we this, we that, you know, you might look for ways to flip your sentences too, you know, through our corporate safety standards, we will. So finding a variety of ways to present your thoughts can also help eradicate that. But I totally agree about making sure, I don't know that I necessarily have a standard for number of times within a paragraph, but if you find yourself kind of saying, oh man, every single sentence in this begins with we or the team, or every time it's our team or whatever, I definitely think looking for that is a great practice and a good thing to be attuned to for sure.
Question for me. Do you have a grade level score that you shoot for?
Newspapers used to be 5th grade.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's impossible.
Isn't that something?
Yes, it is.
It's a lot of short sentences, a lot of short words, no $5 words. I did recently try to sneak a versioning into a proposal that had to come out. I had folks having to look up what versioning was.
Oh, good, because I don't know.
But again, it's meaning expanding, it's booming, it's growing. If somebody has to look it up, take it out. It's not worth it. But I would say probably for less so about grade reading level and more so considering the range of people who are going to be reading your proposal, right? So I've got the contract administrator who's literally looking through at the RFP and checking boxes. And if they can't find one of the requirements, that's a problem. I've got the hydraulics person, I've got the roadway engineer, I've got the construction supervisor, like all of these very disciplined folks who need to be able to understand what it is I'm writing to. Gut check is maybe like 8th grade high school, but just simplify.
Yeah, but my goal is at least drop one grade level after I'm done editing. Sometimes we start at 12, like, okay, let's just at least get down to 10 or 11.
Absolutely. And that, I'm pretty sure your Word does that too, by the way. When you come
Yeah.
down to look,
Yep.
it'll, oh, I don't have it set up, but it'll often tell you what your reading score is, or, you know, on a percentile, how comprehensible something is.
Yeah, Hemingway does that. It's kind of the big focal point, is that here's your current grade level, and highlighting sentences that are passive and all that other good stuff. So.
Briefly, I forgot that was the name of the tool, and I was like, Hemingway did used to write in short sentences. That's true. Yeah, that's fair.
Very true.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Ashley, do you have another example, or do you want any other questions before we wrap up?
I have two more examples, but
Yeah.
I think that was a whole lot to throw at folks for today, unless we're cool and however folks want to do it.
Do it again.
Oh, that's a long one. Yeah, let's do a quickie one. All right, this one was not, let's see, let's run the Grammarly on it right quick. So make
The
sure
other
that
thing to note, if you aren't
everything's
familiar with Grammarly, you can like turn off some of those checks, and there's some settings you can play with that I do as well. Sometimes I don't have all of them on, and I just play with them depending on what I need it to do.
awesome. So this one, Grammarly said, man, this paragraph is so boring. I found nothing. Like there's literally nothing wrong in this, but there's also nothing exciting in this. This is one of those paragraphs that says a lot, but without saying a whole lot. So it's about 60 words of not a whole lot that it's saying.
Should we just delete it?
We could. You could probably just remove it. You just saved yourself a paragraph, man. So the delivery of this project requires a project team that has executed projects. God bless. How many times are we going to say project? Oh, 3 more times. The team presented here represents this expertise through a combination of strong, there's a second delivery method experience, familiarity with the scope of work with our combined, oh, there's experience again. Oh, in this delivery, we have provided a team with unmatched qualifications for this project. That hurt my head. Sorry.
Say delete.
Remove. This project requires a team. So we just got rid of like 5 different projects that has worked. Executed projects is also worked for this client previously. Let's make it an interesting sentence and make a compound. And our team, of course, it's presented here, it's in your proposal. How about our key personnel represent this expertise? We just said all of that by saying you need someone who's worked with you before. With our combined experience, how about we have unmatched qualifications or something along those lines? Just get me to the point. What are you trying to say? What's the important thing to take away from this?
Yeah, and I don't like unmatched qualifications, but
Unmatched, unparalleled experience.
oh,
Do you
I know.
love
Don't you love that word
unparalleled?
too?
But can you really say that? Have you asked everybody? Do you know all the teams? Are you sure? Oh my gosh.
That's awesome. All right, real quick, I will share my screen before I have something for you all that's sort of related to this. Not Ashley again.
Keep going.
All right. So a little bit similar to the grammar stuff Ashley was talking about knowing your audience, though, is helpful to determine purpose, tone, structure, length, and details of your writing. So if you are on my email list, you would have gotten it this month, I think this past week. But if you want to leg up on your competition and help write, based off of your evaluators, go ahead, scan this QR code. It's a free guide on how to write to different personality types, both internally, externally, whatever that looks like. So it goes through these different ways of really what Ashley talked about, different ways of writing to make it interesting, to keep everybody engaged. We talked about the grade levels, but it's even another level by considering their personality types. and how we change our proposals based off of that. So scan the QR code. We will have, I also will send it out via LinkedIn message to you as well, so you can have that link. Okay, it is completely free. You don't even have to give me your email address, because that's how we are this week. Because it's my birthday month and I don't care. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up for Wednesday? Yes, thank you, Ashley. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone. Great questions. And thanks for hanging out and listening.
Yeah, and I will put together the book list. Ashley, I'll send it to you. And then if there's any other ones, we'll get that out as well. But yes.
Excuse me, would you mind putting the QR up again? I tried to
course.
do it.
Yes,
but
it can be a little, do I say finicky? I'll try that one. Can you see it? Oh, that's because I said share, but I didn't actually hit the button. Hold on. There we go. There's the QR code again. Yes, we will send out, the recording will go out probably today or tomorrow. You'll be getting that. So you can share it with your team or whatever that looks like as well. So yeah, challenge you to implement maybe one of the rules Ashley talked about today, and seeing if you can develop your own little guide. And I know there was some discussion that the style guides are not on the low end of the price spectrum. So creating your own or other things are some things I've done as well. Maybe not as formal, but cool. Any other questions before we wrap up? Did it work? Otherwise, we'll send the link out. I didn't grab it this time.
It did. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. It is actually a OneDrive link. It is just a straight download to a PDF file. So yeah, when you scan it, it'll go to OneDrive because that's where we're storing the PDF, and it'll go straight to there. Okay. All right. Well, if there's any other questions, yes, replace your utilizes. Don't let people add it back in, because you know they will.
I have to quick shout out that the whole reason there's a dad joke in here, because I figured Jim Beers would want to hear that one. So you're welcome, bud.
Awesome. Okay. All right. If there's anything else, we will ensure that you're replaced. That's really funny. How many words? Yeah, can you write like the
Oh my
worst sentence
gosh.
possible, Ashley?
It was a dark and stormy night. What was? Where was it? What is happening?
Cool. All right. Well, thank you all. If you have anything, other questions, yeah, reach out to Ashley. You can find her on LinkedIn. Go, yeah, she's awesome there. Otherwise, we'll send out messages via LinkedIn and you can connect with us that way as well. Okay. Awesome. Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Yep. See you. Bye.
See y'all.